Experts in the house. Thank you for that welcome, Jennifer. I appreciate it. So I'm Carrie Pollard with Marin County, with Marin Water. We're not the entire county. We only serve a portion of the county, and I'll give you a rundown of what exactly that means. So Marin Water is located just over the Golden Gate Bridge. If you've ever drove over the Golden Gate Bridge into Marin, you've been in our service area. So Northern California. 100% of our water is locally sourced, so we're not part of the state water project. We only get 25% of our water supply from a local wholesaler, and that's on a very limited basis. The rest of our water supply comes from rainfall, and we just heard from your local weather expert on how precipitation can really impact water supply, and that's something we recently experienced, which is why I'm here to talk to y'all about that. But with 75% of our water supply coming from the local reservoirs, it can make many challenges for us, many. We're the oldest municipal water district in the state of California. We not only provide drinking water, but we also are responsible for preserving and protecting the watershed lands where our 7 reservoirs are located. So recognizing that 75% of our water does come from precipitation, rainfall is very important to us. And this histograph for us in the room, you can't see any of it, I'm sure, but those at home looking at your computer can see it goes back to 1879. And there's 2 red lines. See if I can get a pointer here. 2 red lines, which you on the screen probably can't see that. Back in 1920s, we had a very low precip year. And then more recently in water year 2021, we had 20 inches of rainfall. We usually get about 51, right? And so quite concerning for us. But you can also see the variability, right? I mean, we had, 5 years ago, we had an abundance of rainfall, but still limited capacity, so we can't capture it all, right? Looking at historic total reservoir storage, this goes back to 1985 because in 1970s, we had a terrible drought in California, and that caused Marin Water to double our water supply capacity. So that's why this graph doesn't go back as far as the prior. But you can see in 2021, in October, I didn't bring it through today, and you'll see why in a moment. In October of 2021, we were at about 25,000 acre feet of storage. We were looking at having 200 days of water left. We were talking about what's going to happen in 200 days when we don't have any more water and what extreme actions are going to need to be taken to prevent that. Another way to look at this is projected reservoir storage, right? So every 2 weeks when we go to our board, we'd project how much water we have available as we move forward. There were 3 scenarios we looked at: average 25% of average rainfall, 50% of average rainfall, and then average. When we were at 25%, which is the orange dotted line down there on the bottom, we were below 10,000 acre feet. We aren't confident we can pull water at below 10,000 acre feet. We don't know, how much silt and sediment has been filling those reservoirs. We're not really in a position to dredge them in a meaningful way, so it just doesn't occur. There's fisheries issues and other environmental issues that really prevent us from taking those kind of actions, and so we've never gotten down to that low, and we were quite concerned about it. When we look at the 50% of average and the 75% of average rainfall, we layered on conservation. So we recognize what would be the impact of getting our customers to conserve, basically so that we can get through the next summer months, so that we can have additional water supply available to us. And so the 40% call to action was really meant to just be a Band-Aid, essentially, to get us, to having additional supply, which I'll mention in a moment. So board actions, starting a year ago tomorrow. The board declared that there was a drought and had a voluntary call to action. 2 months later, they declared a water shortage emergency and declared a 40% district-wide goal. So we went from voluntary to 40%, right? Like that's not the steps you generally want to take for engaging with your customers and really bringing them along with the water supply conditions. But that was that's the way our code was written, and that's how it was implemented. 2 weeks later, after declaring the 40% district-wide goal, we adopted irrigation restrictions, limiting irrigation to 2 days per week. Generally, we have a 3-day per week irrigation restriction. And so, it was basically somewhat of a ratcheting down, but nothing too overly stringent, if you would, right? So it's just reducing it by 1 day. 2 months later, we went to 1 day a week with assigned, so we could do waterways patrols. Later that month in July, we adopted landscape restrictions for new connections. There's, pulling each way as far as, how to limit new connections. One side of the equation is we need affordable housing and we need to build, and it's finally happening in Marin County, which is a very wealthy community and housing is incredibly expensive. And the other side is, how dare you allow new connections when we have limited water supply, right? And so balancing those concerns, the action that was taken was to allow the sites to be built, but no irrigation landscaping could be installed. In September, we established water use limits and excess use penalties. For our residential customers, essentially it meant that anyone who used more than 65 gallons per person per day would receive a penalty. And there was a penalty allotment for each tier. We have 4 tiers. So tier 1 was no penalty. Tiers 2, 3, and 4 had a penalty of $5, $10, and $15, which made our tier 4 rate just over $36 per CCF. Very stringent. Irrigation customers were not allowed to use any water in any tier without penalty. So it was very, very strict. And then in October, recognizing that essentially that September 21st action to establish water use limits was prohibiting irrigation, to make it fair for all of our customers, there was an action to have a district-wide prohibition on winter irrigation and pool filling. And so when you think of winter irrigation, well, that's not such a big deal. But when, maybe that's true for December, January, February, but you start getting into March, April, May, and Northern California, you need irrigation or you're not going to have any, your landscaping just won't survive. So another way to look at this is in comparison to actual versus targeted water use. And so what was consumption doing during this time? The blue line is our baseline, it's a 3-year average, which we use to calculate our 40% reduction. And then the gray is our actual water use. And to layer on what was happening with consumption as these board actions were being taken, and you just see this flat line, right? Yes, it's a reduction from our baseline, which is great, nowhere near our 40% call to action, but this flat line was super concerning to me, right? It's basically me saying, okay, so we keep ratcheting down irrigation and we're not getting any additional response. Folks are just, not engaging with us, you'd say. And then you see this significant dip. The night the board took the action to prohibit winter irrigation was the start of a significant rainstorm, 18 inches of rain in the course of 6 or so days. And you see that drop there, that says that's irrigation. That's folks finally turning their irrigation off. Exactly what we knew would happen if we could just get them to comply. We would have, had that level of savings throughout, interestingly enough. Another way to look at this is looking at water storage, right? So how much water did we have in our reservoirs when each of these actions were taken? And, back in winter of 2020, we were up here, which it actually turns out is right where we are right about now, concerning of no additional rainfall coming, but we'll see where that road takes us. Just the significant decline, right? We basically got very little rainfall during this time period. And here's the 2 big storm events I mentioned, one in October and another one in December, bringing us to currently at 96% of water storage capacity. And this cyclical event, right? We only essentially have just over 2 years of water supply available to us. Recognizing that this is where we are today, once again, and there's no projected rainfall in the forecast. We're already in mid-February, basically by April, rainfall is done in Northern California, or at least in our area. We may be, there's a potential for being right back here again, which is scary for me, let me tell you that. So one of the reasons why I was invited, I think, was to talk about what our actions were, right? Kind of boots on the ground and what we did to work with our customers. We worked with our landscape professionals. We really focused on strategies for survival around landscaping because landscaping was our target. Absolutely, there was no doubt about it. We recognized that reducing indoor water use is great, right? It's kind of additional behavioral savings, but we were going to need the landscape irrigation reductions in demand to really get us through this drought. So working with our local landscape contractors was really important. We opened up a recycled water fill station for our residential customers. You can see a Prius here with two rain barrels in the back that they fill up and take away. We distributed about, I believe it was over 500,000 gallons of recycled water at this residential fill station. And it's still operating once a week right now. We did a couple Drought drive-up events. Folks could just pull up and pick up their bucket, shower heads, faucet aerators, leak detection tablets, et cetera, and information on the drought. And really the goal was just increase awareness. We had a very active water waste program that really aligned. It really kind of kicked off and became more of a tool we were utilizing once the 1 day assigned for irrigation was adopted. Because, right, if you have 2 days a week and it's unassigned, how would we know if someone's irrigating more than 2 days a week? There's really no way to verify. So we really focused on education. We had our field crews come in early. They worked overtime, even in the morning and then also in the evening and on the weekends to issue door hangers. Recognizing that not all door hangers actually made it to the customer, we also send a first letter for every door hanger. And then those two were just, notices, educational components. Second and third notices was where there were fines, $25 fine for the second notice and $250 fine for the third notice. Community engagement and outreach. One thing we learned from this drought is that folks don't come to their water district for any information, right? They basically will just look at us to pay their bill and that's it. They don't really follow us necessarily on social media, et cetera. So we started leveraging our community trusted voices, right? So your schools, your local parks, other environmental groups to push out our message and then direct folks back to our website. And we found that was really successful. That was one message one takeaway that we felt, we finally got kind of a handle on, because, we're doing all these social media posts and we're just not getting the uptake or a lot of comments about, we don't know there's a drought happening, why are there water use limits, et cetera. And so really using these trusted voices was important. Other community engagement, we have had on the books a prohibition on serving water or only water served upon request at restaurants. But of course, our board members go out to restaurants and they get a glass of water every time they sit down and they say, your marketing is not working, people aren't hearing us. So we went door to door to every single restaurant, hotel, and gym to talk to the manager, to leave them some materials, leave them table tents, and just to kind of make sure that they were aware of it. And suddenly, we kind of start to see that uptake, right? Where we start to see folks actually responding and not just serving water every time you walk into a restaurant, which is super minor, but it's water awareness, right? It's just reminding people that we're in a drought and water supply is really important. We also get a lot of tourism, right? So we're just over the Golden Gate Bridge from the city. Lots of folks from the city come and play in our backyard for, the weekend. And so they wouldn't necessarily have heard about the drought unless they have these opportunities. So that was really useful. Another event we did was we worked with a local brewery. Lots more people follow breweries than they do follow their water district. This brewery brewed a two-day drought IPA, and it was associated with a cycling event. So it's a big cycling kind of brewery. We had 3 different routes that folks could log on to Strava and ride, and it basically took them by our reservoirs that were very, very low. Then they could go in and have a beer. They could get a free Marin water bottle for their bike. It was super inexpensive. My staff got to design the beer label, which they loved. And it was a great partnership with the community, right? And so I think that was another big success and it was the cycling folks that reached out to us about it. It wasn't even, on our radar to do something like this. So that worked out really well. We did a Drought Facts Friday and a water storage update every Monday. So Drought Facts Friday was an opportunity for us to engage with our customers to provide a better understanding of their suggestions that were coming forth for drought response, like dredging reservoirs or fog capture or trucking in water from various locations, bringing in icebergs, all those great ideas that kind of come up when you're in a drought and folks want to help, provide suggestions. This is what we looked at. We used Drought Facts Friday for. Numerous, bill inserts and flyers and newsletters around our rebate programs. We really tried to drive our customers to those opportunities. Yard signs, you either love them or hate them. In our community, we had probably had about 50 people that would come and pick up, 20 yard signs at a time and distribute them. They were like our, another boots on the ground kind of champions, and they loved them. They were all over the place. Yet still people called us and said, we didn't know they were in a drought, or we would run into them in the grocery store and they didn't know there was a drought going on. But yard signs, I felt like they were very, very useful. We got a little bit of pushback from folks saying, well, you're only focusing on landscaping. I already don't have landscaping, et cetera. So we did some indoor collateral as well. So with all this marketing and outreach, customer inquiries, so we were averaging about 150 or so, and then drought hits in March, start to increase. Phone calls and customer emails increased by tenfold. So if you're walking into a drought, staff up early, temp help was incredibly useful to allow our customers to get a quick response. They may not have always had the answers, but they were a voice on the other end of the phone, as opposed to just leaving a message and having someone call you back a week later because there's just so many calls that we couldn't get to. So staffing up early was really important. Incentives, I mentioned we did a lot of push to our website to drive our customers to our incentive programs. We did have some incentive programs prior to the drought, but we definitely added a whole new package, including increasing our turf rebate to $3 a square foot. We did a direct install sheet mulching program. We worked with Flume to do incentives. We offered pool cover incentives because we had a requirement to cover your pools. How would we know if someone was covering their pool? We wouldn't, but because we had the requirement that they cover their pool, we wanted to offer that incentive. And it was amazing how many customers participated in it, considering we had had it in the past and there was hardly any participation. Hot water recirc, and then we brought toilets back. I thought we were done with toilets, but apparently not. Smart irrigation controllers, laundry to landscape, gray water is big in our area. So we had already had an existing program there. Rain barrels and cisterns is the same. Enclosed washers continue kind of forever. Again, they're kind of like toilets, right? I think they're going to go away. When we look at program participation, so every month we'd report back to the board how we were doing in achieving our targets. So the board established these monthly targets on the far right. Notice the top one, it's just the one that's really quite impressive. The board had us shooting for 400,000 square feet of turf a month. It's amazing, right? There are award-winning programs that are, will replace 400,000 square feet over the course of a couple of years. We were shooting to do that in 1 month. We never got there, right? As of today, we're at about 527,000 square feet, which is still quite impressive, And you can see all the other programs, participation levels there as well. But I think the turf program was really, again, it was our main focus was on landscaping, and so having that really meaningful $3 per square foot incentive was key. Mentioned that we increased our rebate from $1 to $3. We removed the planting requirement, right? We acknowledge, if any of you have turf rebate programs, I'm sure you have a coverage replanting requirement, percent coverage replanting requirement. We removed that, recognizing we just didn't have the additional water supply for establishing new plant material. So we gave them this $3 a square foot and said, when the drought's over, we will let you know and we will provide you resources so you know what kind of plant material you should be putting back in these sites. But today, do not replant. Sheet mulch and let it be, right? That's the best thing you could do. We also reduced the time frame from 90 days to 45, right? We wanted to push our customers to drive them to take action immediately. It was just that was where we were with as far as the necessary response we were looking for. The Mulch Madness program was a direct install sheet mulching program where we went in, we had not district staff, but we had a local Conservation Corps, the North Bay group, which hires youth, had them go in and cap irrigation heads and sheet mulch sites for free for our customers. When we just did the analysis, ended up being about $4.26 per square foot, so slightly higher than our $3 per square foot turf rebate. But, you know, the goal was to drive our customers to this if they didn't have the opportunity to do it themselves or the ability to do it themselves. So as far as our lawn removal observations, kind of a little bit of program details, we hired 2 field staff to do the inspections. We adjusted the timing. We originally only allowed sheet mulching. We really wanted to push, you know, the sheet mulching, but we found that we did need to allow for gravel and other permeable surfaces to be installed. And as I mentioned, replanting is now going to be our focus and our challenge, right? Because we want to get folks to replant so they don't just scrape it and put sod back in, because there's actually no requirement. That was part of the understanding, right? That you take action now and we'll give you this rebate. It doesn't say there's no easement or anything that would ever prevent them from doing this. And so it's really on us to help educate them around replanting appropriately. So I mentioned early on that conservation was really just gonna, the goal, right? The 40% reduction was to get us through the summer where we would have additional water supply. So talk a little bit about water supply projects that we were considering. Of course, conservation was number one. Another was getting additional water from our local wholesaler, right? We already have a pipe and a connection from them. We're in a drought. Of course, they are also, you know, have lower precipitation is in the region as well. But they also have much larger reservoirs. And so there's a little bit more of a capacity there to work with us. And what we found is during the winter months, we were able to take additional winter water from them because, you know, they just don't have the capacity to capture it when we did get, you know, whatever little bit of amount of rain they were getting to the north. We were also considering package desal and an emergency intertie. So that would be a pipe on the bridge. Back in the 70s, when I said we doubled our water supply capacity after the drought of the 70s, we had a pipe on the bridge. Actually brought water from Central California over the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge into Marin. And that project was underway once again as kind of our primary focus for bringing water immediately to the service area. And then for a bit of entertainment, included some of the other suggestions that were evaluated because everything was on the table, right? Fog harvesting, solar desal, excavating the reservoirs, water by truck, barge, or rail. We didn't evaluate bringing in icebergs, but there was a newspaper article that mentioned that. Groundwater storage and recovery. So that's actually something we will continue to pursue, but it's longer term, right? So that's taking, again, winter water when it's available and injecting it into the local wells. Marin Water actually doesn't have any groundwater wells, but Sonoma Water does, and that would be an opportunity for us to get some water from them throughout the year. And then finally focusing on recycled water as well, again, longer term. But there's we have 2 recycled water projects that are now being developed and moving along quickly, recognizing if we had those last year, what a different situation we would have been in. And that recycled water is going to be key to our long-term water supply portfolio. Oh, and what's next? So tonight, our board is considering repealing the irrigation prohibition. You know, as I mentioned, we have not had any rain since December. There's none in the forecast. Any storms that seem to be coming seem to be just going right around that ridge, that resilient ridge that's parked over California. And so there's some concern around, you know, are we going to be able to, are we going to be able to stay out of the situation we were in last year again, right? And so tough decisions, and we'll leave it up to them, right? Citizens Advisory Committee. Throughout the drought, there was a lot of discussion around restrictions and what restrictions make sense. And we're decided that the Citizens Advisory Committee is going to be an opportunity for us to really look at what drought response is. You know, why was it that none of our customers responded during the irrigation prohibitions, yet when it rained, they turned them off, right? So what was happening there? Was it COVID? Was it that they didn't want to be dictated to anymore, and you know, another aspect of their life? We don't know. So kind of an opportunity for us to learn a little bit more about how our customers are hearing us and responding to our call to action. Another is looking at residential non-functional turf, which will be part of the Citizens Advisory Committee. The board is considering on March 1st a prohibition on commercial non-functional turf. So we're following Southern Nevada Water Authority's lead. We feel that that's a kind of an easy win, and there's there's interest and capacity from our board and the community to move forward on prohibiting on commercial non-functional turf. We're going to update our water storage contingency plan, recognizing the lessons learned. As I mentioned, so we went from voluntary to 40%. Well, we only had 3 triggers, and the third trigger was health and safety, right? So those were our 3 options. Oops. Those were our 3 options, and that needs to change, right? We need to kind of be able to ease our customers into this process in a more meaningful way, along with outlining what actions will be taken at each stage. Replanting is going to be big. We're looking at net zero offsets for new development. Again, building needs to continue to occur, but we want to be able to confidently say that they will not impact our long-term water supply, especially as long as we don't have any additional capacity available to us. Full-scale AMI, we currently have a AMI pilot that's about 5,000 accounts, so about 5% of our accounts have AMI, mostly businesses and our high water users. So, looking at implementation of full-scale AMI, there's another acknowledgement from management and our board that had we had AMI, what a different situation we would have been in, right? We would have been able to notify our customers around leaks. We would have been able to not have to do patrols, right? We could kind of use that information in a more meaningful way. And so that's great, because now they want to move forward on it. And then, of course, continuing to pursue additional water supply. During the drought, we, because it was an emergency, we were able to move quickly and not have to go through all of the environmental review process for each of those projects for desal and pipe on the bridge. And now that we are no longer kind of in that space, we're going back and kind of taking a step back to start the full environmental process, right? Because we're potential for lawsuits and others, right? If that's not handled appropriately. And so kind of taking a step back and evaluating each of those projects to figure out, make sure that, if we're going to put $100 million into a water supply project, we want to make sure it's the right project and not be rushed to get it done. And so with that, this is my contact info. Been signed out because I've been signed into another device. Do you see that on your screen? Hopefully everyone on the Zoom is good. So I do have an ask, right? So all of you have great information, I'm sure, and I was fortunate enough to have a conversation with Austin Water yesterday, some of their staff. So if any of you have really progressive policies that you feel strongly about, you feel like, wow, this is like my champion, either program or policy or initiative, there's my email. Send me some language on it. Send me like your board report or send me your code language, whatever, right? Because we're at this point kind of reevaluating all of our programs and policies, and I'm sure you guys are a great resource. So that will be my ask to all of you as I wrap up.